no, we don't want to play against that. And that's something Fnatic could have kept a secret for a while, but I definitely feel like it's part of the world's meta and how it's going to develop.
Yeah, we have seen it a couple of times over the last few days, so it's not too surprising a pick, especially since Caps loves Ryze. Like, he's always loved to play Ryze, no matter how ineffective it can be sometimes in his hands. Ryze, Xayah, and the Tristana getting taken away from Young Generation, so we're going to see second tier AD carries here. Fnatic have removed Rek'Sai and Jarvan. Still that Kalista, yeah, as you say, will be the final ban.
Kalista, and then you go over to Kog'Maw, you go over to Twitch. There's a few other things. We haven't seen much Twitch here.
AD Cannon.
Okay.
AD Cannon. No, Reckless has not played AD Cannon since Rift Rivals, where it was a resounding failure, in all honesty. Young Generation not going for the Rakan, which we've seen so powerful, instead going for the Thresh as their support lock-in.
Yeah, considered a counter to the Rakan because Rakan's W is a back-loaded cast time, so you move and then you go, and you can interrupt it very easily with the Flay and stop that from happening. But the Sejuani making it through for Broxah here. This is a champion that constantly is banned away, and with Fnatic banning away two other top-tier junglers, it kind of leaves Venus to go towards the Gragas, which he already played and wasn't that convincing on.
It's going to be the Rakan for Jez's as well, something he's played a lot throughout the split, very comfortable on that as well. I really want to see how this next step develops, because my question is, do AD carries get left for past ban phase 2, or are you looking to lock them in here?
It depends on how high your priority is on certain champions. Like, do you think Cho'Gath right now is something that you'd pick as Young Generation in the top lane because you don't feel like there would be so much to counter it? But I do feel like AD carry, if you're wanting to take it here, like a Varus, etc., then this is where you do it.
That's an AD carry. That is an AD carry.
Get your grading scales ready, boys.
Oh, baby. I love that, because Big Koro is like this player who is known. He's like, yeah, I'm the aggressive AD carry. I'm the big man here. And he says, you know what, Reckless? I can take you on. You know what, best AD carry in Europe? I can take you down. I'm going to pick Draven. This has been something Fnatic have played against before, because of course Misfits have cracked out the Draven a couple of times throughout the split. It is going to be the Varus, as you said, for Reckless. Not as aggressive an AD carry as a Draven, you might say, Zyrene.
Does give him engage potential. This is a very engage-heavy bottom lane. This kind of harkens back to the days where when Rakan first came out, it's like we're still playing some of the Ashe, the Jhin, the Varus. And Varus, very attack speed based. We'll see if he can keep that uptime going. But this bottom lane, Young Generation, if they can land hooks on either of these guys, if they can actually upset this bottom lane, it could be very good for them. But remember, Fnatic, they like to play a little bit around that bottom lane, the MVP of Reckless, and get him going.
Have to see where Broxah decides to path early on. Said that we wanted to see more aggression from Young Generation. Thought they were too passive in their first game versus Chaos last in game. And well, Draven and Thresh definitely bring oodles of aggression to the bottom lane. Fnatic removed an aggressive top laner in the form of Renekton. Young Generation answered in kind as they take the Cho'Gath off the board.
Yeah, remember the Renekton did take the first turret in that top lane. The Amumu ban for Venus.
Yeah, not something you see too commonly.
Yeah. I'm actually just unsure because Amumu, they're thinking that would be, I don't know, the Gragas would take place of that. I feel like maybe they just threw the ban away.
Quite possibly. I think like things like the Gragas already being locked in just makes you think that that's probably going to be the jungler, but I'm sure there is a strategy behind it for Fnatic.
I feel like you never, unless it's a throwaway ban or like some really crazy thing, I feel like there's never an opportunity for you to throw away a ban. Even if you wanted to ban like Galio or something, because you don't want it to go top, if you're going to ban something that's just like Trundle, whatever, like just get something out of there.
I doubt it's a throwaway ban as well. Let's
that's the thing.
Credit to Fnatic. They've done their research. They're taking this one game at a time, and they will have prepped for Young Generation. It's going to be a Nidalee lock. Assume that's going to go on Venus in the jungle, and that Gragas will go to Ren in the top lane. Now they're looking towards their mid laner. Nor didn't have the best of game ones. We'll be looking to bring out a more powerful pick into Caps.
Yeah, the Syndra here. Some counters still on table. We'll see if he goes for like the Fizz, the Echo, the Vladimir, and the Galio. So this is kind of why they wouldn't ban that away. But the Galio was something they were talking about for Soaz. Could be for Caps.
I really don't like that composition if it gets locked in for Fnatic. They've got so little damage on that Fnatic lineup, and LeBlanc gives you just a smidgen more damage in that mid lane, Zyrene.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because LeBlanc was a champion that popped up again after nerfs came around. can't keep her down. Nothing seems to keep her down. You nerf her wave clear, you nerf the damage output. Doesn't matter. She's still this very, very relevant champion and a skill-based matchup here between the LeBlanc and the Syndra.
Well, Caps has been showing off his talents in the first game. Had a very good game on the Rise, of course, going 6-0-6. Null struggled on Syndra. He went 1-2-4 up against the Chaos Latin Gamers. And in a skill matchup, personally, I give it to Caps. Perhaps I am slightly Fnatic favored in my view of the situation, but I think the last two matches these teams have played speak for themselves. And as we come into the games, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about what these compositions want to do. It feels very early, very aggressive from Young Generation. Fnatic, on the other hand, perhaps a little bit more traditional with the Shen, with the Sejuani, and then a couple of damage dealers.
Yeah, a lot of frontline here for themselves with the Shen and the fact that they have the Sejuani. I do like that combo, but then they have that slipperiness and the option to 1-3-1 with the LeBlanc, and then they have Reckless in the bottom side and an ample engage from this team from Fnatic.
Young Generation looking for their first win. Fnatic looking to continue undefeated through the play-in stages. It's World Championship 2017 in Wuhan. And what I really want to see from Fnatic here is exactly what they did in Game 1, but with a little bit more grace, with a little bit more refinement, not giving away those kills that they did, and just closing the game out cleanly like we saw C9 do.
Yeah, you want Fnatic to kind of not have to play against their opponents, but play more against the clock. Can they outdo themselves? It's almost like those ghost runs when you're playing like Mario Kart, right? It's like, oh, I got to beat my last time. I got to keep going. That's what you want to see from one of those top 1 seeds in a pool that kind of looks a little bit weak. But for the other side, for Young Generation, you want to see them use this Nidalee, use this Draven, be aggressive and try to win lanes, because you're not really going to out-macro a top team in Europe, right? I don't feel like Young Generation have that in them at the moment.
Phoenix won out-macroed us. Okay,
I know. I'm just saying from this perspective, yeah. Right? In this matchup in particular, you're not looking at your macro game. You're looking at smash lane, get enough of an advantage that it's insurmountable that you get to force things down. That's usually how I would approach these matchups, where it's kind of the David and Goliath in the group.
It's a little bit courageous from Young Generation as well to pick, mechanically very heavy laners and say, okay, we're going to win lane against Fnatic, who are known for their strong laners.
Yeah, but you can't pick losing lanes and then just have them run all over you. So they pick things that are incredibly aggressive, but now it's kind of the opposite of, some teams like to stall it out, and we know a lot of teams that are not really high in the standings will usually be passive and not make things happen. So you want to see proactivity here from the side of Young Generation and trying to make Fnatic play their game.
Just so you guys know, we do have a slight pause at the start. There's an audio issue with one of the players. We'll get into game as soon as we can, obviously. And we know you want to see the screen and not Zyrene's beautiful face.
I keep doing this, man. This is getting a little bit weird.
Sorry. Maybe it's the makeup. Maybe it's just...
Yeah, it's the makeup.
Yeah, 100%. But let's talk about what you really want to see from Fnatic that shows that they are a Seed 1 team, that shows that they are a team that can challenge with WE and with Cloud9 and with the teams that are already through to groups.
Yeah, because they're going to end up in a group, that potentially may not be very easy for them, and you want to have kind of great showings now to make teams have to watch you, have to be careful, because we're talking about best of ones right now. These are best of ones that they're trying to smash. Then you have a best of 5. Then if you make it to the group stage, you're once again in a best of 1, like kind of double round robin, and you're playing 6 games there. So it's not going to get that much easier moving forward, and the competition will just become even harder.
And the more that you win in a dominant fashion, the less you actually have to show.
Exactly.
We talked about showing the Rise earlier on from Caps. Perhaps now this is a more traditional composition. The Varus isn't really too much of a surprise.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point you just made, Medic, because you look at Cloud9, none of their games went over 30 minutes. It was 22, 25, 27, and 30. That's it. You don't know what they look like in an Elder Dragon setup. You don't know recently what they're going to play around, and these are different patches. So even going back to their NALCS and their regional qualifiers performances, you don't have a great idea of what their priorities are, how they're going to shift them. So there's still a lot that they didn't give up. And you can see, we saw it the other day where there's a lot of fans in Wuhan of Cloud9 and even of Fnatic here too. Little princess.
Little princess.
Wait.
It's a skin, because he's wearing the cape. He looks a little bit like a little princess. We saw Fnatic doing the heart signal as well on the stage. It's the little crossed fingers. It's a heart, apparently, in China. I was wondering what they were doing, whether it's like a money symbol or
probably,
something.
yeah, I was like, are those the valves coming out?
What, of a heart?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just meant to be the same shape as you would do with your fingers.
Yeah.
But it's just those stick out. But
I feel like it's more anatomically correct.
Let's be technical here. Valves don't come out
That's true.
of the heart.
That's true.
There's 4 chambers, and you've got 4 valves, and then the pulmonary arteries and the aorta that come out.
I love getting things intentionally incorrect.
Intentionally
yes.
incorrect, yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's what I do when I'm casting as well. Just need more people to comment on it.
Well, I like doing that around you because you'll correct me with all your medicine knowledge.
Triggers me, in all honesty.
I love it.
And you know what else sometimes triggers me?
What?
Audio issues.
Okay.
They can be frustrating.
Well, they're very frustrating. It depends on the issue as well. Yeah. But I don't want to speculate here. I do feel like both teams on stage are just in that mindset of let's get in, let's remember what our coach just told us, what our game plan is, and don't drop anything on the way.
And you have to be ready to have pauses and to have these things happen, because they do happen sometimes on the world stage, and you need to be able to compose yourself and prepare and continue in that right state of mind to be able to actually go into the game at your full effectiveness. And perhaps it's even a good thing for the teams to have this happen early so that they can be prepared for any eventuality that might happen.
Yeah, and it's something that I feel some teams aren't comfortable pausing for like small things like audio issues or. I talked to Mike Young after his first few days. He was like, my screen settings were wrong, my mouse settings were wrong, but I thought it was all in my head and I was just nervous. And he didn't want to pause because he didn't want to throw his team off their groove, right? So having a team and having a mentality of I need to make sure that I'm good first so I can help me so that I can help you and be in the game instead of having to worry about individual things is good, because it puts you in that right place to be a team player.
And that's what we want to see from both these two teams as well. Coordination. Even when you've got an early aggressive team, you can win lane, and then you help the other lanes. You help the rest of your team. You go for those dragons. I think we're just going through ready checks, so we should be into the game in just a minute.
Yeah, and that's why I think that mid lane, we talk about how, there's whose meta is these tanks, these Cho'Gaths, these top laners. Is it these bottom laners, these Tristanas, right? I honestly still feel like mid lane is the most important lane in the game to get ahead, to open up the map. If you open up bottom, you can maybe do lane swaps and get the top turret, and I would say that's probably the second most prevalent place that you should actually put your attention. But having a winning mid laner, even just in skill, winning matchup, whatever it is, even just camping them with your jungler is super important, and especially at this Worlds where there's so many great mid laners with jungle as their partner.
And that's so vital for Fnatic as well, because during the split, we saw Broxah go nowhere near mid lane. Caps was on an island. Broxah actually spent one of the lowest amounts of time near mid lane of anyone in the European LCS. That's changed a little bit. He's now much more willing to give Caps the time of day, much more willing to help out. And I actually think Rift Rivals was a major shift for that, because we saw the NA teams just absolutely destroy Caps in the mid lane.
We love mid, and it's it's affected my casting a little bit, because when I was looking at the last game, I was like, where are your 3 control wards around mid? Where are all of your regular wards to force sweepers and force people to come towards mid? Because as a mid laner, you want the action to come to you. You don't necessarily want the action to go elsewhere early, because you just want to be able to have things happen central and then move from there.
When we are onto the Summoner's Rift as everything gets set up. Fnatic versus Young Generation. Young Generation still looking for their first win, coming, of course, from the GPL, the second seed after GAM had such an impressive showing at MSI.
And we'll see, because they didn't look much like the Gigabyte Marines, and people were expecting that a bit. But now it's looking a little bit like the Gigabyte Marines are a one-off at the top.
But we said that about Flash Wolves a few years ago.
That's true. But also, the composition from Young Generation, I want to see what this looks like, because this looks a little bit more like Gigabyte Marines. Crazy stuff. They're going to be up in your face. Venus isn't known to be that jungler who's kind of like taken after Levi, but this Nidalee gives him an opportunity.
Oh, 100%. And Young Generation, they're basically the sister team of Gigabyte Marines to a lot of degrees. They stayed around, they delayed their flights to make sure they could scrim more with Gigabyte's Marines. They copy a lot of their styles, but they're really intent on being a unique and individual team as well. They don't want to be Gigabyte Marines light. They want to have their own play style and be able to play it to great effect.
Yeah, only been around for, I believe, a year, the Young Generation squad, and they've gotten second behind Gigabyte Marines pretty much all year long. And so, able to have a few best of fives that went the distance against Ascension, and then ended up as the second seed here.
And I love the trust they give to their players. They are going to go for a bit of an invade. Reckless gets caught out by a spinning axe. Pallet there as well.
Just getting some damage.
Sejuani has such good secure on buffs as well, though, because you get the stun proc, and it gives you a massive burst of damage when you do get your passive off.
Yep. It's a flat 400 magic damage against camps. Actually made me question if it was bugged or not the very first time I played it, because it says 10% HP or like percent HP of your enemy, and then there's like this little thing that says 400 damage, and I was like, oh, I thought it said up to 400 damage like other abilities, right? No, it's just a flat 400 against camps. She does Scuttle Crab faster than any other jungler in the game. It's a little absurd, but it does allow her to work.
Big Koro here in the bottom lane on that Draven. He and Pallet have been widely regarded as the best bottom lane in Vietnam, the strongest 2v2 matchup. And Rekkles and Jezus at times have been looked at and they say, they're not as good as Sven and Mithy. They're not as good as Hans Summer and Ignar. They're much more passive in the lane. You can see Pallet and Big Koro getting level 2 first have already forced that Fnatic bottom lane back.
Yeah, so far, Big Koro, A+. Oh, Stylen? Okay.
I just like looking at Draven in the bottom lane. We are having connectivity issues again, which is why the pause hasn't come up on your screen. We might be able to continue the game just for a couple of moments. Looks like we're going to continue on with the action.
Everything is normal. This is fine.
Everything is awesome.
This is fine.
Everything is cool when you're part of a team like Young Generation coming into their first Worlds International Tournament. I'm very proud of that reference, just so that you know. I don't know if you caught it. Sometimes I'm just very subtle with my references to things.
I won't make you say it out loud. So I will say, no, I did not get it.
Did you not?
Nope, but don't ruin it.
I'm not going to do it. People will have got it in the audience.
Yeah,
I'll get the tweets.
It's for them.
I've already got the tweet saying, why have you not watched Dragon Ball Z? It's because I watch League of Legends.
Shame!
I watch League of Legends and I watch Pallet going aggressive into the jungle, getting wards down, trying to make sure that they know where Broxah is on his rotations.
Yeah, and Broxah will be on that top side. They saw him with the leash on the blue, and now they've been able to take over that whole bottom side. So this is good from Young Generation. This is a strategy to make sure Broxah is not fighting in this bottom side of the map where they have this pushing lane. Because if you don't cover this pushing lane, you don't get to push. They're blind. They don't get to actually walk up and have that Draven throwing axes at them.
So what do we see Broxah do in response? Because he knows that this bottom lane is where probably Venus is going to spend his time. What does Broxah do to try and answer that on this Sejuani?
So I feel like if you're Broxah, you just chill. You just make sure you can get what you can, ward up, get your Tracker's Knife first. Don't go for anything like the boots and the Ruby Crystal or anything like that. And just make sure you live up to the name of the item. Start tracking. Make sure you know where Venus is. And I don't feel like you're going to play aggressive bottom. I don't feel like you're going to play aggressive in mid for the most part. I want Broxah to give mid some wards, and I feel like Soaz just needs to survive and play this matchup accordingly until he's like level 6, and then you can start doing things on the bottom side of the map.
Well, there's the tracking on Broxah, where we spotted out, steps on a trap as well.
Yep.
We'll now know that Venus has vision. Venus has gone to the Tracker's Knife as well, so both of them really valuing this early vision.
Yeah, look at that. You just saw both Big Koro and Pallet sitting around waiting for the Sejuani to like go back in the jungle or to go into theirs and then try to collapse on him. It's actually really interesting that they gave up some pressure and some CS to do so.
1 CS, or 2 CS ahead in the lane now. Rekkles will be able to try and answer that, but is there a point at which Big Koro and Pallet can take over the lane, or is it just continued, sustained pressure on towards Rekkles and Jezus?
So when you're playing Draven, there's 2 things you can do here. One, you let the wave freeze and push towards you. You have to set up the freeze though and understand wave manipulation. And the second thing you can do is you can just keep them under turret, get turret damage as much as you want, and then pull jungler down, try to 3-man the turret, and just do it that way. But it looks like he's not getting too much off here except on Jezus. And I don't know if this is set. This is actually set up to freeze if he wanted it to, but he's not playing that way. He's going to keep going for thinning the wave and pushing and trading. So if you let it slow push, you give the enemy the advantage of trading because there's more minions that'll attack you. But if you just keep it underneath their turret and you keep this minion wave thin, then you get more opportunities to trade and have a favorable minion wave. That's got the heal already.
Heal from Rekkles as well. Minion wave is going to hit onto Big Koro, but he has the summoner advantage here. Pallet still with the ignite as well. Jezus has an ignite of his own, of course. Jezus has actually had time to go back and pick up that Nomad's medallion, so he's going to be getting extra gold in this lane if they can keep it relatively even.
And I feel like that's where some of this advantage is coming from, is the fact that he's able to stay even in that lane. And a little bit of that is top lane, actually. Looking at Soaz with that Tiamat already purchased, and he's winning this lane by a decent amount here with the CS and just the better mechanics and the better basics on last hitting.
two veterans fighting against each other. Ren is the team leader for Young Generation, has been around the block a few times, but not many people can match up to Soaz's international and experience record.
Looks like, nope, not going all the way around.
That's the thing, like at the moment it's so tentative, and it's trying to work out exactly how the teams want to play these matchups and want to play the vision game, because both teams are really heavily invested in wards early on.
Yeah, and right now it's Moby Boots for Pallet, first item, and now he's roaming towards the mid side, maybe clearing the vision, helping find these control wards, but looking first and foremost for a gank.
Flash hook can of course catch out LeBlanc, but Cap still has a flash of his own and the distortion to be able to jump his way away. Null is going to be given across the blue buff as Young Generation, with an aggressive early composition, have had a slow-ish start.
Yeah.
They've had a few signs of brilliance. They burnt Reckless's heal, remember, in that bottom lane, but they haven't quite been able to capitalize on it yet, Zyrene.
Yeah, I feel like Fnatic, like I said, they're playing safe enough. They're just playing safe. That's all they have to do right now. Their composition is a little bit better in that mid-late game, especially if the Draven doesn't get anything early. Or the Nidalee, right? And Brox is keeping pace with the Nidalee. Right now, though, Soaz can flash the spear. He's going to be okay, still with that CS advantage.
Spear does a lot of damage. Soaz respecting the fact that that Nidalee could burst him down. Here's the unleashed power onto Caps. Jumps away, the flash by Null. Caps is clapped in the mid lane by Null.
Solo kill by Null, and he also had to go flash for no flash there. Outplayed him strictly in that 1v1.
Holy moly, that is absolutely incredible play by Null. Didn't have the best performance on Syndra in game one, but showing up big early on.
And Venus gets the red buff off of that, and now he's towards where Brox is. If Broxa goes in on this, okay. Just being a little bit hesitant there, and that's right, because Caps TP's back to lane to pick some of it up, but dying like that early, I talked about how mid lane is so important. Now Null has an opportunity to start snowballing the game.
Amplifying Tome, a little bit of magic resist, some boots as well to get yourself back into the lane, and this is a pure 1v1 from Null. And
right now, Soaz is focusing on last hitting the wave, so he's not looking really at Caps' HP or the burst that could come through, and he's just trying to stop the back, so no Shen ultimate there, Null just 1v1s.
It's a bit of greed from Caps as well, because he had flash, and the Dark Sphere came in, he tried to dodge it, didn't flash.
It was interesting. Yeah. Because I think he was looking to just see the visual indicator of the force of will, because Syndra's holding the W. You're not expecting her to Q, you're expecting her to throw the W, and that's what you're going to flash, but she just throws down a Q, and he doesn't get the reaction. But now Caps has flash advantage, and I like that Young Generation, their warding, we can compare it to the way that mid lane was warded last game. It's just a little bit more important for them to know what Caps is doing and keep this mid lane pressure.
It's very topside focused. If you look down towards the bottom side, that's where Fnatic have their vision advantage. There is a Mountain Drake on the cards. They've got Shen. Fnatic have been known to go for these 4-man dives down towards the bottom lane. Would not be surprised if Broxah starts pathing down here and Caps perhaps even looks for the roam.
Yeah, Caps would be the one that I would expect to start roaming down here, as well as Soaz. Just have 4-mans bottom. That's really what I think about when I think of Fnatic and them finding success. You know, we're talking about they should be able to play through Caps, but when I think about what they do, it's usually 4 people bottom, 5 people bottom, going down and making sure that they can get an advantage on that star 80 carry.
Let's have a look at how Big Koro is doing in that lane. He's pretty even with the Varus. Reckless has his heal back up, but Koro will be getting those stacks of adoration building up, and if he can get a kill, that is a big gold investment that jumps straight into Young Generation's favor. They are actually ahead in gold now as well, after falling slightly behind early on.
I do feel like Young Generation, though, in this bottom lane, are in a position now where they don't have ward coverage. Brox is now coming down to the bottom side. Shen ultimate is something they have to worry about. So going aggressive, I think they may have missed the window where they were just trying to push and not do a lot of turret damage. But I feel like they missed the window for Draven to really just keep autoing, keep getting damage, and push it in. So I think a little bit of a failure there in terms of the aggressive play that we were looking to see.
There's the Chain of Corruption, there's the Charm, there's the Quickness, there's the jump in. Broxah joins the fray as well. That is a very dead Draven.
4-man bottom, didn't need it, but we still see Soaz coming in with the ultimate, and that was just the chain CC. They lost control of the bottom side of the map, and that's exactly what you want to see from Fnatic. And they just shut down those adoration stacks, like you were saying. There was that Draven nerf where he loses even more.
He does. It might even be first tower blood down towards that bottom side as well.
But now we see 3 people mid as a potential counter from Young Generation. They're going to try to go for the second clap.
The ward there actually spots them as they come around. Caps knocked back, flash hook, Pallet. That's another kill onto Caps. Pallet will secure it. TP coming in from Soas to try and save the tower. Meanwhile, bottom lane tower does fall. Fnatic with 1,000 gold ahead. And it looks like Young Generation are not able to completely capitalize in the mid lane. They are pathing up towards top though. And Gragas is on that tower.
Yeah, Gragas on that tower, and you can see even using the ultimate just to clear minion waves. Gonna bring the Thresh up as well. Nidalee will be here too. But Fnatic have that gold advantage off of that one turret that they got. Oh. Too far.
Big Koro, jump in. Jezis doesn't get the knock up. Knock back onto Reckless. Has got the flash. Big Koro with a flash of his own will jump underneath the tower and escape for the time being.
Yeah, but now with no flash, your next chain of corruption, your next charm, your quickness from Jezis should be a kill and another combo. This bottom lane, ever since like Jezis really joined the roster, I feel like when he started playing things like the Camille, when he started comboing with the Fnatic Kennen pick, right? It was a lot about having an engaged bottom lane where once you blow a flash, you're not playing so much to like kill or play for lane or anything like that. You're playing for flash. You're like a jungler where you're like, as long as I get their flash, we're good. Because my flash for his flash means that I have a better engage ultimate that I'll just be able to use that on him the next time, and it should be a kill.
And we're starting to see more of that evolution of Fnatic as well, going from the more outlandish picks in the Camille and the Kennen and these things that perhaps the meta didn't define as good, into picks that the meta says are good that still work with their unique and their individual styles.
Yeah, it's not so much like forcing it to work, it's finding the things that still have those strengths, like you said.
I want to come back to mid lane as well, because Null is looking very strong here. 20 CS lead over Caps, who is struggling, but meanwhile in the top lane, it looks like Soaz is going to be joined up by Reckless and by Jezis looking for a tower.
Yeah, there's 3 people, 3 on the top side here, 4 counting the Sejuani coming in. Now they're looking for Caps!
Gets knocked back, the hook doesn't connect!
Oh.
As Pallet was expecting the flash away from Caps, but I think he was still stunned up.
Was still stunned up there. But they'll be able to get some damage on that mid turret and take that down, but they're trading that top turret for it.
They do lose the top tower, but mid lane tower opens up so much more of the map. Null is having a great game. Pallet's roaming around really well as well. If Young Generation can continue to put pressure onto Caps, they have a window of opportunity in this game.
And Caps, somebody that, you said they don't play around a whole bunch and gets left out to dry. And when Brox is not on this aggressive jungler and he's playing something like the Sejuani, it's just kind of a back to that strategy of, hey, go bottom, then we can go top. And it's funny, because we were talking about this beforehand, where mid is important, and bottom is like the second most important, because once you get that bottom turret, you can swap it to top turret, right? But then you go from there. What objectives have you opened up? But look at this. I talked about the lack of flashes earlier. They're going to go for it now.
Doesn't quite get the connection. Explosive Cast knocks him back, but the charm is going to land in the end as Big Koro caught up, overextended in the top lane, and will eventually fall to Broxer. Reckless was trying to get the kill for himself, and Broxer just swiped away the hammer.
He doesn't get an assist there, but time is of the essence here when Caps is getting bodied in the mid lane here by so many people. He's just trying to buy time. There's 4 people here. This would actually be an advantage if they get this turret. For Young Generation, trading a turret for a kill is worth it for them because they don't actually lose anything else in terms of structures.
2 towers in the mid lane, a gold lead for Young Generation 15 minutes in. Coming into this game, there was no one, I think, out of any of our analysts thinking that this would be the case. Fnatic have struggled against this early game composition coming out from Young Generation. They are going to go for the Rift Herald though, and that basically secures you a mid lane tower if you can use it effectively.
Yeah, now there's a bottom lane that needs to be cleaned up by Big Koro. And then mid lane, when do you use this Rift Herald to siege that down and try to equalize those turrets? Because 2 mid lane turrets down, it's not just that singular one, it's those 2, which is going to give them so much control of Fnatic's Wolf Camp and a lot of easy to access vision for them.
Coming back to the mid lane discussion about Caps, we've seen a couple of really strong LeBlancs across the course of play-ins thus far. Jensen being a prime example of how to pilot this champion incredibly effectively, and Caps was meant to be the next big up-and-coming mid laner from EU. He was meant to be the next Bjergsen, the next Jensen, the next Forbidden, or the next Perks. And
he was the baby faker.
He was the baby faker, and he hasn't quite lived up to that moniker yet. There are times when he looks absolutely brilliant. There are times when he looks like he can 1v9 and take on the world, but too often he falls behind. Too often he gets caught out by the enemy team.
But let's just say right now, Null has been playing incredibly well. He's at that 10 CS per minute mark. He's the highest CS in the game, tied with Reckless right now, who is already averaging a 10.6, I believe, which is actually ridiculous. When I look at CS per minute, I'm looking at 9+ for a lot of the carries, and that's over time. That's over, you know, all of the games you've played. Bad matchups, good matchups, matchups you get camped, matchups that you die early, things go wrong. What is your consistency stat? And Reckless has one of the highest, I believe, like the highest in the world right now for that. And we're seeing somebody like Null in this game with an advantage be toe-to-toe with him in terms of what they're picking up on this map, because he is somebody that now Young Generation can go ahead and leverage.
Fnatic do give a lot of farm to Reckless as well, just to clarify that. He does farm incredibly well. He actually has a 20 CS advantage in this lane as well. Across regionals, he averaged 16 farm ahead at 15 minutes, which is pretty darn devastating when your enemy AD carry is basically a kill behind in lane.
Yes, and like you said, there is only a finite amount of farm in League of Legends, right? If somebody is picking up this absurd amount, it's got to come from somewhere else.
Oh, beauty, Venus!
And from Venus, it's coming from Brox's pocket.
Oh, that was so pretty to watch. Broxer could have blocked it, didn't realize that Venus was there, and it comes down to vision once again, Zyrene. Extra wards, extra pushing to try and clear out these control wards gives Young Generation the extra Rift Scuttle.
But like, if we literally took the proximity of everybody to mid lane in this game, it is overwhelmingly in favor of Young Generation. I don't think I've seen Jezzes and Reckless around that mid lane yet, and that's why the ward control has just been in favor. There's 2 control wards, one on either side. Palace just doing that for style points, but there's a control ward from Young Generation on either side, and now everybody's collapsing because there's so many damn wards. It's just like, help. We chunked out the jungler. Let's just get everybody in here to get rid of these damn wards and make something happen.
Well, Fnatic have realized and perhaps have listened to you, brought 4 members towards this mid lane, so as it's just off towards the top side of it as well.
This is an engage.
is there if they want it.
This is an engaged position for the team. Ren over the wall, and then they say, okay, we'll just back up. Because right now, Broxa, you can see the Sejuani ultimate come through. You can see a lot happen here. Now they're just trying to clear. So the control boards fall, and there's none left in the inventories of the Young Generation. They have to back and restock to reestablish control of mid lane.
First item spikes have been hit across the board as well. Ardent Sensor first for Jezzes, has got the Sight Stone as well. No Ardent Sensor on Venus, which is something we have seen from Nidalee players, instead going towards the Athenes first.
Yeah, I actually see both those items on Nidalee players now. It's really interesting because you buy it just to become like a heal bot, and you spam that heal on people, and it makes it so that you're having a pretty good time. Also, fun fact, because the Tracker's Knife gives you 225% base mana regen when you're in the jungle, not when you're out of it, you actually get, I believe it's 55 AP or 45 AP from Athene's Unholy Grail. So as a jungler, buying Athene's Unholy Grail, you can see Venus's AP goes from 125 when he's just walking around, and then when he gets actually in the jungle and not the river, it'll go up to 170. So he gets himself right there, boom, 45.
Quick maths. There's the Rift Herald was spawned in the mid lane as well. It was actually all the way back at the inhibitor tower. Does mean that Fnatic are able to close out this turret, equalize the score 3-3, and get themselves about an 800 gold lead at the 20-minute mark.
Infernal Drake in 15 seconds. Even though everything's been equalized now, Fnatic, what are they going to do? They're sending Caps to the top side with his teleport, and this gives the proactive play over to the side of Young Generation as he clears this out and uses abilities before TP.
Especially since Soaz is down with the team. They're still playing a 4v5 and they've got the teleport, but if you put Soaz up there, Stand United joins so much quicker.
Yeah, he's going to maybe try and get mid priority, but there's TP already, and they got the TP out now from Caps.
Infernal Drake's still there.
There's so much engaged from Fnatic. There's so much engaged. I don't know if you can walk even close to this. They're so scared. Yeah, exactly. You have to watch out for that. Venus still got hit by it.
Does manage to get away, but Fnatic will take their just desserts in the form of an Infernal Dragon.
Well, also mid lane priority. You'll push this out. If somebody gets caught in rotation, it could be the second turret in mid lane going down. Remember, We talked about they have the Glacial Prison, but they also have things like the ultimate from Reckless.
Got a hook onto Boxer as well. The chain of crops is going to come down. There's the quickness from Jez as he tries to lock him up. Caps jumps in, but knocked back by Ren. Good body bot from him. Jez goes low. Big Koro is now opening up the axes. He's chucking them into the back of Soaz and secures himself a kill. I think I saw 329 extra gold for him as well.
Nice. Caps. Looking for Venus, though. He wanted to be able to burst him, but remember, LeBlanc takes a little more time for that.
That's not the sort of play you expect to see
Baron?
from someone who's gone 0-2 in lane. And
Yeah.
Young Generation could call for the Baron. Ren is there.
It's a bait. Ren still has Body Slam Flash. Oh, Pallet!
Flash from Pallet. Broxer gets body bopped up. Null's going to get the scat of the week as well, and that is a very dead Sejuani.
They killed the jungler. They killed the top laner. Now they ended up getting off of that. Null got mana back from having the Morellos. Now they can start this up. They just have to avoid the engage. But remember, stand united.
Well, they've still killed Broxer, and perhaps they've killed the hopes of EU. Caps jumping in. Here goes Jez's as well. Baron down to 2,000. Ren gets jumped out of the pit. The Baron falls. It's gone to Young Generation, and they've still got members alive. Jez is low, but 3 members have died, and it's only Null and Ren who will escape to the backside.
That was bold from Fnatic. Jez's with a fantastic engage onto the back because everybody was getting to the back of the pit, but then they still keep their eyes more on the Baron than on the members of Fnatic. So Young Generation have Venus flash back in after getting pushed out to get the Baron and secure it.
Zyrene, if you said to me before this game at 23 minutes, Fnatic would be equal on kills, equal on towers, and equal on golds with Young Generation, I would have laughed in your face. Young Generation have stepped up so well in this game. They played their composition really well as well.
It's actually just completely equal on both sides. 3 turrets apiece, 1 Drake apiece, and then they also have 5 kills apiece. It's this Baron now that makes the difference. And Broxer got hooked trying to get out of there. Pallet, this man has been doing work. Loving this right here, where Soaz ends up going in, and then they try to keep him there as long as possible. Pallet with a great play backwards, and Ren with the slow, just in case the flash comes out.
389 gold.
Nice. It's not as much as you would want, but
extra long
still gold.
I'll take an extra long sword if I can get one. Let's look at this Baron fight again.
Jez is in the back, and then Soaz gets to taunt across too. Venus now has to go away, and when you're behind the Baron, there's more AoE damage. He's doing back spikes. Hold on, though.
Engage onto Ren. There's the chain as well. Here comes Broxer looking for the stun. Can't quite get it. Ren once again escapes. Perhaps an overcommit there from Fnatic into the Young Generation.
Brox is 100% in Sejuani range there. If he has Q up, QR, 100% you can hit him there. But decides it's better to save that in case. Is this a base race?
Oh, it'd be beautiful if it was. It looks like Fnatic are just going to get 1 turret, but they might lose their inhibitor tower here. Caps is backing. Baron is going to help them push in. Big Koro, Pallet, and Null going to be able to break the inhibitor line, and Venus is doing a great job of keeping Fnatic alive. Fnatic actually going to chase back onto Venus, but this is an inhibitor gone. For Fnatic, they will get a kill onto the Nidalee, but how much have they lost for this? Venus is still escaping. Eventually, they'll knock him out. He's going to get away. Not quite enough. They kill him. What more can Fnatic get from this? Because they lost an inhib in mid.
They'd have to siege bottom, but I feel like these 3 members will recall, and then it's just wave clear. Because they don't have Baron, remember. They lost it to Young Generation, and Young Generation are rewarded with the mid lane turret and that inhibitor. All that work that Null did in the early game got them those 2 turrets, and now it's got them that inhibitor after they've been able to revisit.
As we're coming into this game, we talked about compositions. We said, Soaz might get caught out in the top lane. Pallet comes in, but here is the damage from the Unleashed power. Soaz flashes the ball, but you cannot flash away from the biggest Koro on Young Generation.
Now,
the only big Koro as well.
You didn't have to do that. You just could have just left it. It's true. There's an asterisk next to it.
Yep.
But he is the biggest damn Koro on this team.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I was going to say as well, coming into this, we said Young Generation have an early game composition. They want to get this pressure down. They've done that, but the gold is still pretty even with Fnatic. Can Fnatic now start to scale up into the late?
I just think it's Fnatic's basics on CS is just what's keeping them in this game. And then they've had really good fights. And right now, we're seeing Caps try to get something here. That still hit.
No vision in the bush, though, and here comes the TP from Ren. Young Generation might take this because it's a split Fnatic. They have to back away in all different directions. And eventually they will be able to escape. Young Generation do get away as 5.
That is some really good patience there from Young Generation. They know that Soaz could have Stand United and teleport to join. Ren uses his TP because it could be an all-out fight and wants to be there immediately. And now they get to back. reset, have this inhibitor wave pushing in the mid, and the Cloud Drake is the thing that's next on the table here in 30 seconds, 34 seconds between these two teams. But there's so much control for Fnatic of that area.
Young Generation will try and regain control of it, and they have these big power spikes as well. You've got Banshees, Morello, Voidstaff on Null. He is looking absolutely devastating on this Syndra. Such a change for him from game one to this game.
Yeah, it's a very big change for them. But one thing that I'm looking at is, I'm looking at that mid lane. No, like you said, this guy, I don't know what's going on. He's just playing like a man possessed up against Caps. He got some attention, but that was a solo kill to start it off.
It was such a good solo kill as well. Something like Syndra is good at getting solo kills, but he just outplayed Caps across the course of a couple of minutes, really, to get that solo kill.
Yeah, he got the solo kill, and then people were like, oh, this is a lane we can leverage. Let's go here. So even the Thresh that could be getting advantages in this lane with a Varus, a low mobility AD carry, he decides instead, let's go mid, use the mobility boots that he purchased first. He's not looking at any of this Ardent Sensor stuff. He's just going straight towards mid, trying to get hooks, trying to get caps, and then the second kill came down and got them that turret.
And the rest of the Young Generation squad are looking pretty strong as well. Want to see Venus get that Ardent Sensor soon. It's sitting on an Aether Wisp at the moment. Assume he'll go towards the Forbidden Idol and the Ardent Sensor just to buff up that Draven a little bit more.
Yeah, something that I talked about a little bit was the Athene's Unholy Grail now gives you AP, gives you 5 AP per 25% base mana regen that you have. So there's already base mana regen on the item of 100%. So it's already an item that's a 50 AP item when you buy it. If you're a jungler and you have that 225% from your Tracker's Knife or even just the Hunter's Medallion, you end up getting, what was it, 45 more? It was 45 more than 125 to 170. You get 45 more there on top of it. So when he purchased this Athene's Unholy Grail, it was 50, but this is actually a 95 AP item that he purchased, and it's typically for supports, but this is why Jungle Nidalee is buying these items. You go, oh, it's a supportive item. But then you go ahead and buy yourself the Ardent Sensor. That has 50 base mana regen on it. So then that makes the Athene's Unholy Grail like a 105 AP item, right? So it just keeps stacking when you have those extra ones on top of it, and this Nidalee is honestly not hurting at all for any extra for damage.
Alongside that, you've got the buff that you give to Draven with the Ardent Sensor and the heal, which of course gives you extra attack speed on it, so it's just so strong on that Draven. Big Koro is sitting at 2-3-0, has completed the Infinity Edge and the Static Shiv, is looking pretty strong and probably has a little bit of gold to spend as well, sitting on 1,300 at the moment. So I want to see that next item completed before we get into this next fight.
Right now, we're seeing just advantages mostly from that mid lane. It's about 1,700 up for Null. Then you see on the bottom side, Reckless is up about 700 himself, or I guess 900 himself. And then in the top lane, Soaz is down about 700. So even though the Baron did go over to Young Generation and they got that mid inhib, they're still sitting at only a 1.5k gold advantage, which is spread across one of their carries and one of their tanks. Not so much that Draven, where Reckless still has an advantage there.
Obviously, we are very sorry about the pause, guys. It's due to a server issue. We're just waiting for everything to stabilize before we get back into the game, but hopefully we'll be right back on into the action as soon as possible. I want to talk about next steps here, Zyrene. What is it that Young Generation do next to really close out this game? Because they are still in a winning position, but to me, it feels like the later the game gets, the more it goes towards Fnatic's favor.
So a lot of people will have that kind of gut feeling where you're like, oh, Fnatic are still fine, right? And it's not, I wouldn't say it's so much because you're like, oh, Fnatic are like this team that has this high pedigree. I feel like it's because when you look at the compositions, they just have so much in terms of engage that we saw it when the Infernal Drake went over. We're like, oh, Young Generation, they're in a great spot here to like siege. They're at the Infernal Drake first. Then they all pull off of it because they're like, no, we don't want to get Shen flash taunted. We don't want to have a chain land. We don't want to have the Chain of Corruption land. We don't want to have Jezzes jump in with the recombo. And you don't want to have like the Glacial Prison. There's so much long-range engage here from Fnatic, and that is key when you're playing against a team that wants to kind of be a little bit spread out and has good skirmishes, but they don't have high CC, right? So the Nidalee doesn't offer CC. The Draven barely offers any CC, right? So you're looking at this composition that if they are not 5-on-5 and the CC doesn't hit perfectly, then Young Generation have an uphill battle because they're facing damage against a lot of crowd control. When the crowd control hits, your damage drops to 0.
The best CC is
yeah,
death.
and the reason that exactly, and the reason that people feel, or you would feel that Fnatic still have an advantage because of that is because when you're proactive, that means any time that young generation misstep, somebody is in the wrong position, they could get Sejuani ulted. So you have to respect the range at which these things happen. It's one of the reasons that Rakan is so damn popular and so damn good in the games means, hey, we're sieging a turret, but make sure you're always thinking about from all angles this 1300 plus range that could possibly come out, or else you lose.
And I think there's a big thing about just which team has more engage in general in the play-ins thus far. We saw it in the last game with having that Rakan, having the ability to jump on the backline, the ability to lock people up really defines how teamfights go. And then you're looking at vision for that as well, and how you can set up around making sure the enemy doesn't know where you're going to engage from, doesn't know where the threats are located.
And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to when we hit the group stages, is because SK Telecom T1, historically, one of the best teams in the world at playing with low engage because they know how to bait objectives. They'll get to the dragon first, like we saw Young Generation do, but then they have the better setup. They know what they want to do. They'll throw spears. They'll end up using things that kind of force you to walk towards the dragon and put you in a position that you don't want to be in, and they will constantly draft compositions for that. So I want to see what SKT does if they adhere to that, where it's, hey, engage is the king, or they'll go, engage is for babies. Disengage is what you need to do. You just need to be better at getting to these places first. Because I think both are actually very viable ways to play League of Legends.
We have to see which one our analysts think are more viable, as we're going to hand it over to them as they break down how this game has been going for Fnatic and Young Generation thus far.
Well, Matic, surprised to say it has been incredibly back and forth. Young Generation definitely stepping up here, but I think the first thing that we have to look at is the draft phase. Talk a little bit about the decision-making on both sides.
Because it's not great on both sides, to say the least. There's a couple things going on. You want to take the Fnatic side?
I kind of want to take the Fnatic side.
All right, let me start off with Young Generation then.
You go ahead, my friend.
We've been talking all tournament long about attacking the enemy team's strength, and as opposed to just kind of maybe trying to work around it or something. Nothing attacks enemy AD carry more than saying, we're going to blind pick Thresh and Draven so that we can destroy your superstar AD carry. And that, of course, did not work out at all for them, and it has been one of the biggest problems for Young Generation in this game.
Yeah, I think the bottom lane right now for Fnatic is looking on point throughout this game so far. They've been the main carries, but someone who's been lagging behind a little bit has been in the middle lane, and that is Caps. And when you draft a LeBlanc in this composition, to me, it just raises a lot of question marks. Because number one, LeBlanc into Syndra, very commonly known as a skill matchup. But I feel like there are a lot of safer options that he could have gone for that make more sense from a compositional standpoint. If you want 1-3-1, Corki can fill that role. If you want wave clear, Corki can also fill that role. Who's also another good champion into Syndra. Like, just starting to get the idea that the LeBlanc pick, I feel, was an overconfident move. That,
so here's my question. We talk about it as a skill matchup. If you look back at the first game that Null played, do you think it was unreasonable for Caps to take a skill matchup? Because we did see him struggle in a lot of mechanical scenarios.
In that sense, I would say not really. It can make a little bit of sense. Also, a Nidalee pick is one that it can get very scary if it gets out of control. But if the LeBlanc gets ahead, she has an extra squishy target to prioritize because Nidalee is basically the squishiest jungle champion in the game right now, potentially with Elise. But I can see the idea that if you think you're going to smash this team, that you don't really respect them, the LeBlanc pick is a good pick to style on.
That's a very valid point, Mark. But do you want to know why Fnatic is our Pool 3 team rather than our Pool 2 team? Because they had that same sort of mentality going up against Misfits, and then they ended up getting 3-1.
I like you say Pool 2, like they were never, ever going to beat G2.
We have to be realistic there, okay?
You're not even giving the Pool 1
The
credit.
point is, that sort of perception is what landed them in this position in the first place. And I don't care how hard Young Generations lost earlier on in the day, their goal was to take every team seriously. And right now, I felt like Cap specifically really underestimated his opponent, and he ended up getting punished for it.
And the thing is, we talk about the Draven being potentially an overconfident pick, the LeBlanc in a similar fashion, but one of those picks is working right now. One of those picks has had a decent amount of impact in team fights. The other one is having trouble doing damage to a Nidalee, which is, one of the squishiest junglers in the meta.
Yeah.
So things are looking a little rough for Fnatic right now.
Yeah, I mean, Nidalee, if she gets ahead, she builds some MR. It's just that the LeBlanc shouldn't be behind. So that's the big problem. And like you're saying, the Draven, it's not like it took off and started doing better in the mid game. It did get some good auto attacks in, threw its ultimate out in one skirmish. That's great, but it really does feel like this came down to both the mid lane play out of Null stepping up hugely, as well as the fact that they, when pushed on making a decision, they were actually able to execute on that. So you have to give your credit to Young Generation for stepping up here.
You also have to give like a lot of onus towards the confidence the young generation is going to feel right now, because a lot of people expected Fnatic to have the same sort of performance that Cloud9 and WE have had, but already in game 2 of their group stages, they're starting to struggle. They're starting to fall under the pressure. And young generation, based on the current game state, are on track to win out on this game.
And I think the biggest concern is that we're seeing Fnatic, when the pressure is on, now default back to some of the same strategy we saw them use pre-Rift Rivals, which was splitting up the map, hoping that they can outthink their opponent in a lot of these high-tension scenarios, whereas they're coming up on the losing end of so many of the plays that they're initiating.
Yeah, that's what feels like the weird part to me, where it's going beyond like, okay, maybe our draft was a little, greedy. Maybe they got, some good plays on us. It does feel like a bit of a breakdown with how much young generation is actually getting off some of these plays. It's not like, oh, we just lost the target. It's now like they're running around the map. They're taking our mid inhib. We're losing people left and right. That's where it feels a little bit more of a potential like synergy issue for me.
I think overall, though, it's going to be interesting to see exactly what Fnatic can do to get back in this game, because we do see some small individual mistakes. Soaz most recently was just caught out. Now the concern is how do they actually come back into this? What is actually the next step for Fnatic in this team? Because let's be honest, Varus is not a late game scaling hyper carry. I mean, neither is Draven to a certain degree, but it doesn't feel like there's a clear, this one champion will inevitably be a game-winning win condition.
I believe right now, YG, do they still have the Baron, or is the Baron just about
It's about to time out, I believe.
Yeah, so I believe it's just running out. So, because one of the first things I was going to is Fnatic just need to wait for the Baron to run out and stop trying to force things from happening and just accept your losses. Now, the one thing I will give credit to Fnatic for is I think that throughout this game, their vision has been stronger, and they just need to either try and find picks or punish a poor map movement from the side of young generations. But very much so, it's about trying to demonstrate that you can punish the small macro mistakes the young generation move in, just find pick after pick and get a few of those kills and gold onto the LeBlanc, because unless she can start dealing damage, this mid laner is not going to have any impact in these future fights.
I think that's the big thing. You're talking about a Nidalee, a Syndra, and a Draven. Those are very immobile. You have a Rakan, you have good chain CC follow-up. If you're able to get the Shen Taunt in there, the Varus ultimate, you can find these pickoffs pretty easily. And especially, like you're saying, wait for that Baron buff to come out, and then wait for the next neutral objective where they're going to pin themselves in a situation. Hopefully you can find a flank. Maybe the LeBlanc is able to get the fight started off, or you're just actually able to land some CC with that Rakan on the back line. That's pretty immobile.
All right, we're talking about these win conditions, but I want to know how likely do we think this is? Because last time we were in the midst of a game, I asked you to give predictions. We felt like it was pretty clear at that point in the game who would come out on top. Once again, we looked for routes out, but young generation, definitely not the favorites coming into this game. But we're going to get right back into the casters. We'll see what they think about it.
Thank you very much, Dracos. We are back on into the action. All pauses resolved, thankfully. Very even game here. Zyrene, 1,000 gold lead to young generation. Baron relatively soon will be back up. The Cloud Drake up in only 6 seconds as well. Perhaps not the most impactful dragon in the world, but I'm sure young generation will want to set up for it.
Yep, but like Vedius was saying, there's better ward control right now for Fnatic. Pretty much across the board, they have 4 control wards down and just a litter of wards everywhere, and they're ready to replace all of them. So they definitely have an advantage in that department, especially with neutral objectives coming up on the horizon shortly. And this Cloud Drake, don't know if it's exactly what they want to pick up. Young generation just seem like the setup is more important than actually starting it up. They've had a window here, and it looks like bottom turret is what they want.
Bigco will be able to secure that one for himself. Mid inhib is still down, of course, which is why Fnatic have to be much more on the back foot, because young generation push forward. Looks like Fnatic are going for another base race here, trying to trade mid tower for this tier 2.
Well, when you're base racing against super minions, I feel like that's not a race.
Just better calls from young generation. They are playing the map better than Fnatic at the moment, and Fnatic are not reacting.
And now what happens is you get the Cloud Drake for free after getting that tier 2 turret. Reckless has to back up because they might just be able to come straight through the river. And now this vision will get denied afterwards if they clear it up.
Super good play from young generation, definitely stepping up as the second representatives from GPL. Jez is engaged, double charm, here comes Boxer from the flank as well, and we see Fnatic start to collapse. Stand United onto Reckless, but Big Koro is still free to pound away from the backside. Glacial Prism, that's Smithy channeling his inner, kills off towards the side as Cavs jumps in as well. But young generation able to disengage as Fnatic do not find the pick they want.
Now you get to keep throwing spears, keep trying to poke, keep trying to land something here, and then force them out. And you can see right there, they have to back up. Caps, though, looking for damage on Null.
Doesn't really have that much damage at the moment. Soaz is in such a strange position down towards the bottom side of this fight.
Yeah, it would clear the minion wave, and it would force Young Generation to move towards him, which then he could go up, and the rest of his team could collapse down and pincer. And that's exactly what you would want to have if you're Fnatic, because they have a superior front line with 2 frontliners to really the 1 on Young Generation. But yes, Baron up in 15 seconds. You want to get those backs in now if you can. Checking gold right now, 1,700 on the Draven, 1,200 on the Syndra, and 1,000 on Venus. Right now, there's more spent gold on Fnatic's side, and they are looking for the Fnatic brush.
Gonna see if they can set up around Young Generation. Here they go from the sidebox to jump in, looking for Pallet. That Thresh still very tanky though as they knock Fnatic back. Young Generation perhaps want to re-engage now as Ren goes to the front line. A charm from Jez is a 5-man charm. The knockup. Big Cora still alive and he's gonna pound away on Caps. Ren dead, 2 dead from Young Generation. Fnatic able to collapse, able to get the fight they wanted.
And Null with a beautiful scout of the week there, but it still wasn't enough. And Fnatic are now on the inside track to the Baron to give themselves an advantage.
And this Baron will be exactly what Fnatic wanted, exactly what the Doctor ordered for them. Them hearts were stopping beating there. They were going into asystole, but the diagnosis was death for Ren as Pallet and him died in that last fight. The Baron for Fnatic will be secured, and they will be able to look to push towards the base of Young Generation.
You hear the cheers. Definitely some Fnatic fans in the crowd. And this right here was Fnatic setting it up. They don't get the ward in the bush. They don't see this completely coming. But then the big parts here is Jez is to the back line. They've set it on the desk. Look at that charm. That hits everybody except for the very back line. And then comes through. And no ultimate up just yet. It was 1 second away for Ren before he would have that team fight splitting ultimate with the explosive cask.
A game of vision once again, Zyrene, as Fnatic were able to set up their trademark vision bush. They caught Young Generation out, and now will be looking to start to close out this game. Young Generation have put up an incredibly strong fight, and it's not over for them yet. They still have not had their base broken by Fnatic.
And we had a long conversation about, why you would feel Fnatic are still in this game, just because all the engage, all the potential for picks that they have is very high. Everybody on this team could set up and engage on Fnatic's side. Anybody could catch anybody else out. And Young Generation with the low mobility 2 carries with the Syndra as well as the Draven, and the vulnerability that the Nidalee has when she's sieging is very high. So catching somebody, quite easy to do.
However, we have got the Ardent Sensor on Venus now, so he's going to be able to empower Big Cora even more. Still, an unkilled Syndra in the mid lane has a needlessly large rod to add to her items, and although it took him ages, Pallet has completed the Locket of the Iron Solari and the Knight's Vow.
The Knight's Vow coming through. We'll see who he ends up linking to, because right now the Draven looks like the prime target to do it, because you would be like, all right, makes sense. Yeah. But right now, Null's having a better game.
Big Cora, King Cora now
King
on
Cora.
that Draven. I wonder what you would actually say in the Knight's Vow if you were doing that. I will protect you if you give me life back.
My liege.
Pallet is now the squire for the Draven. One of his many adoring fans. Caps trying to jump onto Null, pops the Banshees, and 1-3-1 has been established here by Fnatic. They look to push in with their Baron buff.
Yeah, and using that Baron buff to its fullest effect. Caps.
For someone who went 0-2 in lane and got absolutely destroyed by Null, Caps is being very brave with some of these.
He's been brave since the pick, right? It's been very aggressive, and it's backfired on him, and now he's finally finding an opportunity to leverage a TP advantage. Because if he's able to chunk him out, it allows him to TP and make a play somewhere else. So he's just looking, testing, trying to make sure something could give and try to give his team that advantage. Because right now, this is just a Baron that allows the waves to push up and get fed to the enemy team. Yeah, Soaz looking for the flank here, and this will be a turret going down, as they have to respect it.
Have to respect the ability to flank in the TP that could come in from Caps.
Whoa,
with the
no!
Unleash power!
Blasted!
There is a new fragrance on Summoner's Rift. It's bodied by Null in this game. Get one every Worlds. This time Null brings it down.
I mean, Null could be just the person who's giving it out, because now he's got a ton of Essence of Caps to give.
Null the clone. As Young Generation once again get the pick, and it's something you do not want to see from your rookie mid laner. Over-aggressive plays, not respecting the enemy mid. Null is someone who wasn't really known that much
Yeah.
before this tournament. Imagine if that was Faker. Imagine if that was Bjergsen or Jensen. Null is bodying him. How much more could anyone else? And Fnatic now looking down the barrel of defeat as they lose their mid laner once again.
And that is just such a boon for Young Generation. Fnatic has been winning those side lanes, especially the bottom side, but it's that mid lane that got opened up. That's the inhibitor that's down. They get to revisit it. Null has been so key. We don't get player of the games at Worlds because no MVP points, but Null definitely be earning it this game because that is 2 solo kills in his lane against his opponent, smashing him.
Fnatic will be able to set vision up around this Mountain Drake. Something they have done well, even being on the losing side, being able to get vision down. They will try and secure this one. And once again, it's Caps who's going, oh no, it's not, that's the Mimic.
Yeah.
I was caught out, perhaps Ren will be caught out by it as well.
But the LeBlanc gives you vision of that area as she walks through. So I like that. It gives them an idea of, are they contesting it from the backside? The answer was no. And we're at an even game again. 2 Drakes to 2 Drakes. But that inhibitor in mid is the thing that I really pay attention to here. Young Generation just have more pressure naturally mid and don't have to answer all of Fnatic's pressure with equal amounts unless it's 5 people like they're doing right now, and Fnatic are just trying to push.
That is a weak power play with a Baron. 2,000 gold, they got a couple of towers out of it, but that was it. Whirling Death comes down, the knock-up used by Jez as he has to flash away and uses the quickness.
Whoa.
That is huge for Fnatic. That's one of their engage tools
Yeah, that's
down.
a big engage tool for them. But remember, they have so many that they could actually potentially use. And there's this gigantic wave on the top side. So if you're Young Generation, push mid, push it down, go top with this gigantic wave, clear the jungle, ward it up on the way, and this is going to pay off in spades because once you get these wards down, Baron up in 1 minute and 45 seconds, these will last until you go and try to get that Baron.
Caps went down towards bot to clear it out. He is backing now, so he will be with the team, but perhaps it's too little too late as Young Generation can push towards this tower. So as there, Broxah with the flank as well.
You got to do something now. There's 20 seconds, though, on Jez's ultimate. Broxah.
Onto Broxah, Chain of Corruption comes out, Soas trying to get onto Null, but meanwhile Big Koro is still alive in the backline. Soas down to half, Fnatic holding on to this tower with their lives.
A pause as Big Koro is stepping forward and, oh.
That is an unfortunate time for us to pause. Of course, the players know that they only pause in situations where it is game-changing or impacts the play, so definitely a solid reason for the pause, I'm sure. But
Yes.
How close is this game, Zyrene? Hanging purely on the edge of an axe, you must say.
Yes, absolutely. Edge of an axe, this seems pretty, wait. It's
Big
got to be
Koro,
a
isn't it?
super sharp axe. Yes, absolutely. Oh, I see what you did there. Okay. But yeah, Big Koro, he's forward. He just got hit by Sejuani. He's up in the air, and the rest of them are ready to collapse. He does have Mercurial Scimitar. He does have Flash. He does have Heal. But you have to think this came out because of something that that was going on with Big Koro at that moment.
It's always a possibility. We have used Chrono Break before today, so we know that's there if necessary. I'm sure the league officials will be doing everything they can to rectify the situation. Want Young Generation and Fnatic to have the best chance of winning in Wuhan.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, it's all about competitive integrity and what's been going on. But still, in this moment right here, definitely you don't want to be in it as either team. So don't know exactly what's been going on and what caused this.
Let's come back to the state of the game, though,
Yes,
because
please.
Young Generation have been so adamant in this game, so indomitable at times. I thought, personally, again, that after the 25, 30-minute mark, when we started to see Fnatic winning fights, when we started to see this composition really come online, Young Generation would collapse. But time and time again, we've seen them make catches. Caps has been called out by Null, and every member of Young Generation steps up to the plate when needed.
Yeah, every member so far, like we've seen some engages from Ren, we've seen some disengages, and really, I'm looking at Big Koro kind of because I feel like Pallet as a playmaker stepped up. I feel like Null got those solo kills. Venus has been in the right places. And now Big Koro has to match Reckless, we talk a lot about what's going well for Young Generation, where they have a mid Syndra that's 3-0-4 with 325 CS. Reckless is 3-0-4 with 398 CS. He is 2 away from 400 CS at 35, 36 minutes, and he's almost full build. He just needs to complete his Mercurial Scimitar, and then he's there. So Reckless, that's why he's so reliable. The 10.6 CS per minute, the MVP award, all of that. A lot of that, you're just like, okay, KDA is a thing, but at the same time, consistency, reliability, knowing that no matter what happens in the early game, they will be able to accrue that gold And then when you get to that later point, you're in a very good spot.
And winning lane even when you're not expected to win lane, or going even in lane when you're not expected to go even in lane, is the mark of a truly great player. And Reckless does that so consistently. Jez is there as well, of course, aids him. And the Fnatic team has been based around Reckless for a very long time. His last foray at Worlds wasn't as effective as it perhaps would have liked it to be, but this time he's given himself much more of an impetus. He's overcome a lot of challenges this split and is now looking with a very positive outlook at this Worlds tournament. And Fnatic generally are looking very positively at play-ins and saying, yes, it's a great time for us. We want to take it game by game. And they need to against oppositions like Young Generation.
Yeah, especially when this is a game that you were expecting based off of what's been happening with the #1 seeds versus lower seeds, and also looking at what's been going on with Fnatic earlier in the day versus Chaos Latin Gamers and Young Generation versus Chaos Latin Gamers. You wouldn't be expecting this. Chaos Latin Gamers beat Young Generation.
They demolished them as well. Like, you look at the statistics from that game, and Young Generation really weren't able to put up too much of a challenge as the game got later on. They had some moments of brilliance, but you have Nor going 1, 2, and 4. You've got Venus going 1, 2, and 2. Ren got destroyed in the top lane on that Renekton, really wasn't able to do anything in the game.
But the things you can kind of sift through and look at, be like, oh, you look at Null CS, he's actually almost 70 up above Plugo in that game. And so you can see even when things are going poorly, this is somebody who could CS in bad situations and would be a comeback tool, right? If somebody doesn't have those basics and those mechanics, then it's much harder to lean on them as a clutch player and be in those positions. But the fact that he just got so far ahead in this game has kind of opened it up for them, and is really, since it's mid lane too, really makes it that central part of the map that Fnatic have been struggling with.
Unfortunately, we are still in the pause, guys. We're going to hand it over to our prediction kings on the analyst desk. Dracos, take it away.
Thank you very much, Manic. Welcome back to the analyst desk, everybody.
I'm sure they can't wait to see us again.
They're actually just here for Vedius, Marksy. I really hate to break it.
I can go. No.
Everyone's waiting for my interpretive dance of how Caps plays this game.
I would like to see
Is that
that.
just
Can you
playing
show us?
dead? Is
like,
that where you just, you speaking of me down there.
Let's take a look at some of the early action coming in from Caps, because inevitably it has been a really rough game for this guy, and I think going into the specifics is going to be important to figure out exactly why Fnatic is struggling in this game. So when we get that first Bud replay up on your screen shortly, you can see kind of where this game really felt like it started to go wrong. And really for Fnatic, once again, we did not expect it to be individual mistakes.
So just really quickly, you should never really go for a trade like this into a full minion wave that is not even in your favor. Like, it's just a really greedy move where he's trying to assert some kind of dominance, and it ends up backfiring in his face.
Yeah, it was just poorly played. I mean, he had flash up, didn't flash the Syndra Q, didn't think it was going to connect on him. He gets picked off in the side lane there. And the big thing was for me was it was not only that he got that solo kill early on, but it was the CS difference too. It was 18 at 10. So Null was really playing well after we had thrown a fair amount of criticism at the first game of the day where he was missing a lot of combos on Syndra.
And to be fair, 10 minutes is the easiest mark to track, but he had an even bigger CS lead coming into that 1v1. So he was dominating that lane even before Caps tried to go in for the all-in, which I think is a huge credence to him. And of course, that final replay, honestly, Syndra is so far ahead, there's not a whole lot you can do in that scenario, but Null absolutely earned that because he earned that lead in the first place and then made it keep going home. And here, as we look later in the game, it does feel like there were a few instances where Young Generation overstepped. However, at the end of the day, it still feels like they're coming out on top in a lot of these exchanges.
Absolutely. I mean, this is off the back of a pickoff that they got initially onto Broxa. They were baiting the Baron, and then they turn on the Baron. Very risky call, but I actually like these kinds of calls from teams that are considered from the emerging regions, not the favorites. You're trying to go for an upset, and it's very difficult to just straight out prove directly, like, we are the better team than Fnatic, so I'm fine taking more 50-50 focused plays here, because that play is what ends up giving them the tempo advantage to be able to charge up mid lane and take that inhibitor.
Yeah, they got a lot of control over the map, but it also resulted in, or you're also able to see Young Generations in their proper inability to know how to use objectives to turn things even more in their favor. So the thing is, like, if you're Fnatic, you have no smite because you've just lost your jungler. You only have 4 members, and Young Generation have 5. They're in the better position, and Fnatic have to make a choice between trying to contest you for that Baron or giving it up. And Young Generation could have used that to turn and burn and suddenly turn that into a massive fight in their favor, but instead they go for the risk. It ends up falling apart, and while, again, it does turn overall as an advantage, it could have been an even better situation for them, but it's just that slight difference in experience between the two teams.
Interestingly enough, before we came back from the previous break, we did say, hey, how do you win this game if you're Fnatic? It looks like they're behind. They are struggling. They don't have simple win conditions. This next fight shows a little bit about what we talked about in terms of you have a pick composition, try to find a pick. Except in this case, it wasn't a pick. It wasn't a pick. It was more like we're going to start this team fight in a perfect choke where we get to use all of the AoE.
Well, even if you don't find quite the pick-off that you were hoping for, you still, like we said, have good engage. If you can land it onto the immobile backline here, and you see multiple members on the side of the young generation are going to step up, and that's right when Jezza sees his opportunity, goes in, gets the knock up onto 3 men, huge amount of CC, and allows the backline of Fnatic to keep putting out their damage. They're able to win this fight with 2 kills, which allows them to grab the Baron. Should put them in a position to start closing this game out, but more mistakes coming in from Caps.
And very crucially, there is the well that they took out the smite from the equation too, so there's no risk of a Baron steal, and even though they weren't immediately able to kill the backline, they killed the targets that they needed to, and it was just thanks to a lot of the stacking CC and overall a really good engage coming out from Jezza.
So ultimately, I don't expect us to completely know the reason why we keep seeing individual members of Fnatic getting caught out, but it is happening surprisingly consistently throughout the course of this game. And so I want to just talk a little bit about what is going through Fnatic's head. Do you think what is the reason why these players are overstepping in scenarios where they may not have to?
I'm not exactly sure why they're doing it, because that most recent pickoff that ended up happening onto Caps, you're playing the side lane versus Syndra. The point of doing that is not necessarily to kill the Syndra on the side lane. You do that when you're really far ahead, but you can do that still from behind, pull people towards you, and then utilize the fact that you have teleport advantage and maybe look for some things that you can potentially get pickoffs in the mid lane by getting there first. And it feels like Caps feels overly focused on the 1v1 and less about what I can do to help my team.
But I also think it's an element of frustration on multiple levels. The fact that Caps, he's now underperforming. He realizes that his performance has put Fnatic in this early deficit. The issues that are occurring right now is always going to be frustrated regardless of the situation. And it's one of those instances where Caps is trying hard to remedy the situation that they're in, and he's not properly thinking things through. He may not be properly communicating with his team, and it's like when you have such a dominating game 1 and then you transition into, hang on, this is supposed to be another easy game for us. Why are we performing like this? Like, these levels of frustration will stack up, and it comes back to that mental fortitude that we were talking about earlier on. Fnatic realized in their semifinal loss that the mental fortitude was not that strong. It needed to improve, and while I'm sure it has gotten better, you're still seeing remnants of how it can affect Fnatic.
And it also feels like it hasn't been tested since that point when we look back. And my big concern is Broxah and Caps. These guys are both rookies. We don't bring it up as much because we know they both had experience on a bigger stage, but maybe does it feel a little bit like the world stage is getting them? Because ultimately, Broxah feels like he's playing scared again. Caps feels he's like he's maybe trying too hard to make outplays, and we have to wonder, you know, the veterans are still mostly in the right place outside of Soaz getting caught in the side lane. Is this kind of rookie talent maybe crumbling a little bit under the pressure they're in front of?
Could be. I mean, you saw on your screen there Soaz looking a little contemplative, I guess. He was very sullen looking, and it feels like these pauses aren't really doing Fnatic much good, that they have to keep pulling themselves out of the game. If you're doubting yourself, let's say if you're Caps, you feel like, oh man, I got solo killed, I should be doing better, and you're not taking this time to recenter yourself, it actually can be detrimental.
Yeah.
And of course, just as an update on the pause, it is due to a player bug splat. Wow, that was a struggle to get out. And they are attempting a chrono break once again, so we'll keep you guys updated as to how that is going. But, I mean, in the past, there was another situation where we had a pause in Europe, and of course, I talked to Reckless about this, and he's talked a lot about, hey, you have to stay focused, because ultimately, during this time period, you're tracking flash timers, you're tracking, you know, when Baron is respawning. Luckily, some of that's tracked in game for you now, but you have to stay focused on the game throughout all this time, because you come back in, nothing is different, right? Outside a game, you're waiting, you're sitting, you're anxious. And that just feels like a lot of pressure on these guys.
Yeah, you have to be thinking about your win conditions, who's strong, who has what abilities up. Like you said, the flashes, can we go for an engage here? That kind of stuff is pretty hard to track in-game. And when you have to worry about, oh man, like, I'm getting in my own head about my confidence, it's one of those things where it's sometimes nicer just to stay in the momentum of the game and keep trying to ride that instead.
And I believe the situation that Fnatic are in right now is that a fight was just about to break out around a young generation trying to siege into their own base. So they're definitely in a situation right now where they're on the back foot slightly, and you're trying to engage a fight no longer in a choke point, in a fairly open space, that LeBlanc is trying to get onto the backline, and she's not really that strong too. And you've also got Null, who seems to be having a spectacular game just for himself so far. So you've got all these situations also stacking up against you, and you have to wonder how that affects Fnatic. Like, Caps could be thinking to himself, ooh, how do I turn this situation in our favor? How can I still win this fight for my team? And you just got to think, like, how much does that weigh on the young player for Fnatic?
And I want to talk a little bit about the young generation side here, just because it can sometimes probably feel bad for them too. Like, we're finally upsetting a #1 seed. This is great. We had a rough first game. We stuck with our style. We picked the Syndra again. All this stuff starts working out better. And then these kinds of things happen, and you have to take a moment to pause, and you feel like you have good momentum. You're trying to play probably this fast-paced kind of helter-skelter game where you just want crazy stuff to happen, and every time there's a pause, that slows down. So I don't think, either team is too happy about it, but it's going to be about who, coming out of this pause, can figure out exactly what they need to do.
Yeah, who can stay composed, right? Because I think you're right to a certain degree, because young generation, they're putting on a performance.
Oh, they are.
Oh, yeah.
Much, much stronger than they looked earlier in the day, but luckily we're going to continue to see that performance as we get back in the game.
And immediately, Chain of Corruption's going to come out onto Pallet. There's the Glacial Prism as well. The fight is started, but a great stun with the Scatter of the Weak. The knockback as well. Unleash power onto Reckless, Soas, and Brox in the midst of the fray. Jess is there as well. Young generation on the front foot, trying to catch onto Caps, who has got the chains down. The hook lands as well. Now Young generation realize they cannot take any more of this action. And back away from Fnatic. Caps not done. Says hello to Big Koro.
Welcome back, everyone. So, the game's still as intense as ever, and you can see Fnatic has so much time to be like, all right, this is how we're engaging, and Young Generation being like, all right, how are we disengaging this? And it pans out for both teams. Right now, 50 seconds on that Baron. Priority to Young Generation because the mid lane has been pushed up by super minions, and they've been able to establish vision on that top side jungle, and now they get to reset their wards.
Do you like camping, Zyrene?
I actually hate camping. My dad took me camping a whole bunch. It's mosquitoes, there's like bugs everywhere. I hate it.
It's a shame because this game is intense as Young Generation will be looking up towards that Baron. 30 seconds on it. They want to get vision control. They've got a couple of deep wards from that push that they just had in the top lane. Mid inhib is still down for Fnatic as well, so they're going to have to deal with those supers alongside Young Generation looking for this Baron.
Yeah, it makes it so it's much harder to push up, much slower to push up, as you can see, and that gives Young Generation inside track. They can put down control wards, get to look for picks with the Syndra.
Reckless now gone Ginsu's and the Wit's End as well.
Yep, full build.
Something that we see very commonly on the Varus and on Kog'Maw. Works incredibly well as a combination, but Big Koro has 4 items as well. Fnatic now stepping into the unknown, unaware that Null was around the corner, and some good damage onto Soaz and onto Jezis, who is one of the primary engage tools, of course, for this Fnatic lineup. The pause hasn't seemed to affect either of these two teams as they are both
Ren TP behind. He was looking for it. It's going to come down.
Here we go. The TP
Here's
behind.
the fight.
No vision. Here comes Ren. The chain's going to land, but Ren jumps straight in, knocks Reckless in the wrong way, and now Ren is actually caught off at the back. Young Generation trying to get to their top laner, but he is left out to dry. Reckless gets the kill. Caps jumps onto Big Koro, double chains, but Big Koro turns it right back around in his face, and Caps has to jump away.
The fact that Ren went in and then he messed up the combo. Reckless didn't have flash. Reckless only had QSS to try and get out of a knockup/stun, and he was able to get out just barely off of a misplay.
But this game is still on a knife edge as Null looking for Caps. He knows Caps has gone for those flanks. Null just needs an unleashed power. Caps would not survive. Only the Mercury treads, only that meager amount of magic resist. Fnatic still with the man advantage, and the Stand United can now set up around the Baron. They clear out the vision and they start it up. Caps off towards the side, looking for the flank. Onto Null, jumps in with the Banshees, but here comes the unleashed power.
My God!
Caps, Stand United just saves him though, and still Fnatic on the Baron. Are they going to do this? Because Caps has TP. Caps come back. Here comes Soaz. He's teleported in.
Spear, going in.
HP. Venus jumps in, but they target him down. He doesn't quite get it as Boxer secures it. Now Fnatic still looking for the fight as Pallet perhaps is caught out here. Caps coming in with the teleport, and Pallet knocked up. He's going to get taken down as well. The stun into the damage from Reckless. A kill for Fnatic, a Baron as well. And perhaps that is the game for the European representatives.
It might be in the future, but right now they've had super minions just stop spawning in mid for Young Generation. Their inhibitors back up. They got the Baron off that play. I don't think this is over just yet. I feel like we got a lot of time.
I'm getting too eager. I'm getting too eager.
We've been sitting here for like almost an hour, and there's been 40 minutes of gameplay. The game feels like it's much further along than it is, so I don't blame you. The death timers are lower than you would think because it's been so much real life time.
And you have to think for the players as well how much that must weigh on their minds, because they've been in this state of mental
Throws you off.
mental jousting for an hour now, and the long pauses where you're not able to talk to your team as much, you're not able to discuss tactics, you have to just try and keep your mind in the right spot.
Yeah, and I love what you did before where we take kind of stock of flashes. Jez's has his, Reckless about to have his, Caps, Broxa, all with them, and same with Soaz about to have his as well. And this Elder Dragon is in 20 seconds. Fnatic upper hand right now in this fight.
Caps also just got a Zhonya's as well. Works into the unleashed power. You Zhonya's it, you don't take the damage, and then you can look for some more of your own. Could have been a Banshees, but instead goes for the Zhonya's.
All the range!
The engage all the way onto Nor, but he cleanses and flashes away. 2 summoners down on that mid laner now, and Fnatic still have time to set up for the Elder. An Infernal and a Mountain in their back pocket.
So what they got there is they got the flash out of Jez's, but Null had to use both of his summoner spells. So they don't have that same long-range engage, but remember, this quickness is now down to about a 60-second cooldown. This thing is fast in terms of how fast quickly it comes back. It's 48-second cooldown. Ridiculous that he can keep doing these engages every 3/4 of a minute.
Fnatic will start up the Elder Dragon Ren there. We've seen steals of Dragons and Barons alike. Soaz standing in the bush, gets warded up. The hook lands as well. Soaz did use the taunt as well as he jumps through Ren. There's the chain of corruption. Jez is going to jump in. Broxa with the Glacial Prism does hit onto Pallet, but he's pretty darn tanky on that Thresh. And now Fnatic, having burnt a lot of their ultimates, need to be cautious about staying around. Reckless is all by himself here. Caps has a flank.
Yeah, Caps went over to try and flank. They're pushing Soaz up to the top side. Caps now on the left side of this fight. That's a low Elder Dragon. It's below half. There could be bursts coming through and it resets.
It resets, you can hear the audience.
But not completely, not completely. They're walking away. Venus is now, they're gonna try to burst it.
Venus can't quite get there. Broxa does secure it, and now Soaz is looking for the flank. Has the flash, has the taunt. 3 members of Young Generation lining up for him. Caps lands the chains onto Null, and there's the taunt. That is a shot down on to the Syndra, and Young Generation just able to escape from Jez's. Caps still has that flank position. Koro, Zhonya's keeps him alive, but Koro will escape to the top side, and Fnatic need to just accept that they got the Elder Drake and look for a push.
Yeah, Caps there with the Zhonya's because that could have been a crit coming through. We think back to when he actually flashed away from the previous ultimate from the Draven. Didn't work there. Just learning from that. That's that first death for Null because they went all in on him without those summoner spells that Jez has gotten. Oh my god, Soaz got so much HP from that with the Spirit Visage.
And Fnatic from nowhere have now got a 7,000 gold lead. They're going to break 2 inhibitors here. Young Generation haven't collapsed, but Fnatic have been able to take advantages, being able to pick off 1 member and snowball that away from the Young Generation squad.
Now they'll get this second inhibitor here. That opens up so much for them. Like you said, the game was close, but then that Baron went over to Fnatic after the skirmish, and then they had that team fight just now at the Baron with the flank. They're setting them up better, and they're executing better with their engage.
Young Generation will take a lot of hope from this game, though. Although it's currently looking like they'll go 0-2 on day 1. Could still, of course, beat Fnatic in this game. Don't want to totally count them out of it. But challenging Fnatic like this is a breath of fresh air for them, and they'll look at tomorrow and say, we can take out Chaos Latin gamers. We can at least get that tiebreaker for ourselves.
And it may just be a little bit of that wake-up call for Fnatic early. If Fnatic end up going down in a game like this and not losing it, they'll have that sigh of relief, but be like, hold on, we still have to keep true to their promise of taking it 1 game at a time, 1 match at a time. Because the desk was talking about it, where it just seemed like some overconfidence from Caps, but also the team not playing through mid gave Young Generation a lot of rotational advantage.
And Young Generation just seemed to be that step ahead throughout the entire game. We saw base trades where Young Generation were taking an inhibitor, and Fnatic weren't even getting an inhibitor tower, or even just only getting the inhibitor tower in the bottom lane.
And now with the 1-3-1 that Fnatic have, they have the double TP, much easier to exploit. You can see that Young Generation are trying to keep Super Indians out of their base by meeting them almost halfway. Now the Elder Dragon will wear off, and now what are they going to do with this? Because the 1-3-1 will start pushing you apart.
Do you just have to pull the trigger? Do you just have to engage and say, we'll burn both of your teleports and try and get out, or burn both your teleports but already perhaps have killed someone?
Well, remember, Ren tried that with his TP flank. There's no real flank wards on this top side that's set up for him with the vision that Fnatic has, so it's good from them to be, putting their due diligence in their sweepers.
Cap's able to dodge the Scatter of the Weak there as well, of course, so vital for him that he comes back after losing a lot early on and getting caught out a couple of times in those 1v1 matchups. Fnatic with a 9,000 gold lead are just looking to close this one out, but Young Generation have put up a magnificent fight thus far.
Yeah, we're seeing 6 items for those 80 carries. Mid laners are approaching that as well. This gold lead really hasn't manifested too much. Like, I'm looking at these item differences, and I'm not seeing too much of a difference here. Ah, okay, yeah, because 5,000 of that gold lead is Reckless, and he's full build. So Reckless isn't going to get any stronger. He's actually sitting on 5,000 gold in his inventory.
And he's got 545 CS as well at the 45-minute mark. At some point, you just can get no stronger in League of Legends. Pallet looking for the hook on Soaz, can't quite connect with it. Still this inhibitor tower at full HP, but the super minions are pushing in to the base of Young Generation and will continue to force them back.
Yep, 20 seconds on that Baron here. And that's why they have control of this top side. They're just sieging it, making sure that the super minions push bot and mid. And now, this has been unwarded because you've had control of this area for 3+ minutes. You know there's nothing here from Young Generation. It's completely dark, no flank wards, nothing. They're gonna have to face check, walk up, and it's super risky, but here's the teleport.
Yeah, Ren's teleporting in. Young Generation looking for a final foray into battle against Fnatic. Hook onto Boxer, not the target they wanted, but still, Fnatic have not
TP
started
bot,
the Drake.
Soaz gonna try to split. They saw him TP away, and there's a big wave there. And Soaz still has Stand United to get back in, so he's gonna pull Ren here. But Ren can't actually just stay here because he would have to match the teleports. This is Fnatic trying to play the map. Yeah, this is exactly what they're doing. They're trying to pull them thin. The Syndra isn't there. There's the TP.
TP from Caps. Venus is here, has landed a spear on the Baron, down to 6,000. He's looking for the steal. Jazzes there in the front line. That's going to be a Baron for Fnatic. Great play from them to pull apart Young Generation's defense.
Yeah, it required Null to stay there. And because he wasn't up at Baron, they were able to take it pretty easily. And so good macro play from Fnatic with an advantage. It's easier to pull off those macro plays when you have an advantage, but it's good to see that they leverage it because you saw Young Generation with Barons, with the map advantage, not be able to grow that over Fnatic because they were scared of the engage.
It's good to think that they were still able to think about these plays considering how long that pause was and how much it must have weighed on their minds. Still in a position where they're not fatigued, they still have a lot more left in the tank in this game against Young Generation. Young Generation perhaps looking a little bit worse for wear as Fnatic now push in with the Baron towards this inhibitor tower in the top. Big Koro, Venus, Pallet, Null defend.
Inhibitor's coming back up now, and you can see the 1-3-1 still in place for Fnatic, the slippery LeBlanc, and then the 3 members on the top side. Yep, just keep doing this.
Inhib is down to half, Soaz joins it up as well. Still that inhibitor down in the bottom lane, so they can look for this 2-man stack. No minion wave there yet, but Caps takes a chunk of HP from Big Koro, who has foregone boots in his build, going for a GA instead.
Caps on the bottom side now, and they're just rotating around. That top has been a little bit difficult for them to break, but they're just getting damage and chip damage on these inhibitors. Mid already falls, and now this bottom one is looking as well.
Just League of Legends by numbers for Fnatic here. They are painting in the happy little trees, making sure they have the rocks in the right place.
They want no happy accidents.
They've had a few this game as they've been out of position from time to time. They do still have that Baron buff, not empowering the minions in this wave, which means it would take them a little bit longer to get there. Looks like Reckless might be going back to sell his boots and buy a new item, but instead, just going to push up the next wave.
Now, he values the boots very highly here in this matchup because of the fact he doesn't want to get hit by spears. He wants the movement speed to avoid. Could be the Phantom Dancer is what you would replace it with, but the boots still, I believe, give you a little bit more here.
Ren caught out, dodge from Caps. Explosive cast was channeled as well as Ren now looking for the chase, but the jump away from Caps. And now we'll see Fnatic going for a fight on the other side. Chain of Corruption lands, there's a Glacial Prism as well, all onto Pallet. So it goes in, Jezzis trying to connect. Blue Inhibitors dies in the bottom lane as Caps takes it down. Now he's going to join the fight. So it's a great format stun, and Lose Power kills Reckless, but Caps is just going for the Nexus Towers here. Fnatic have been forced back. Caps looking to see if he can win this game.
Yeah, they got to stop him on these Nexus turrets. They might lose one here with the damage from the creeps. Venus getting pulled in from Pallet, and he snaps back. He's trying to finish it, and Null!
He gets it, can't quite take down Nor though, and Ren doesn't land the body slam, but the stun does connect.
back.
Caps jumps in with the Zhonya's, but Fnatic have lost their 2 carries now, and Young Generation have held onto this game.
They lost their carries, but there are super minions pouring into the base. They have to kind of do their due diligence here, take these down, push the waves. They might be able to get that middle inhibitor, but there's 30 seconds on Reckless. They will be able to reach it just barely, and that might actually be the difference.
Fnatic just not quite able to break that base. 10 turrets down in favor of them, and Young Generation still holding on. I thought perhaps they had run their tank dry. I thought they were running on fumes. Young Generation proved me wrong once again.
Yeah, Null. He ended up getting a fantastic 4-man scatter the week. It stunned Reckless. Reckless had to go for a cleanse to get out of it, and then he flashed forward and burst
No
it.
way.
They're going to try to end. They are done with this game.
No way, Zyrene, to close this out. Chain of Corruption comes in. Fnatic trying to fight it back. Young Generation still alive. Big Koro is down into the GA. Ren's there. They don't have any more damage. Null trying to do what he can. Big Koro survives the McHugh. Scimitar, the knockback onto Proxer. A great locket, though, and Pallet lands the hook. Young Generation realize they can't do it because Caps is respawning. Fnatic aren't going to let them go without a fight, but Null blocks them off once again. Proxer has flash here. He will look for the engage from the side. Minions in the bottom lane pushing in. There's a huge wave down
They gotta get back.
One Nexus tower. Can they get back? Can they get to the Nexus?
As soon as they get back, though, they don't have the firepower to kill this off and heal simultaneously. They have to do it fast, and there's 30 seconds on the Elder Dragon.
They will escape. It's up to Ren as well to get away here because Caps is trying to chase him down.
No, he's
realizes
spotted. He's dead.
He's on a ward. Is he dead, though? We've seen Caps misplay today. It's up to Ren to try and dodge around. The chains connect, and Caps jumps in. Goodbye, Ren, says Caps, as eventually he will get the kill on towards this Gragas.
Keeping him alive for as long as
delaying.
possible to delay his death timer. This means that he's stuck, and now it's not already ticking. He wanted to die a little earlier than this.
Will eventually go down, though. Caps does secure the kill. Elder Drake up in 2 seconds. Fnatic, though, could just look for the 4v5 in mid. Caps teleporting in towards that bottom lane. One inhibitor is alive, still for Young Generation in that top side. One Nexus tower between Fnatic and the win that they so desperately desire in this game.
Yeah, and they have 60 seconds of a 4v5. They don't care about the Elder Dragon right now. They care about pushing up and trying to win this game. We're seeing more item swaps. GA swapped out for Death's Dance for Big Koro.
It's up to him, it's up to Norn, it's up to Venus, who has a death cap of his own. The knockback minion's not quite there. The stun, though, is going to land onto Venus. Big Koro chased off towards the side. There's the charm. The Cure Scimitar a little bit too early, but it's still Big Koro surviving. So as
Reckless ending the game.
Unleashed Tower. Reckless says, I don't care about your kills. I want a Nexus. The best 50 gold he secured this game.
Reckless ends the game with the team pushing forward, and really the team play there from Fnatic to understand what to do once their enemy had misplayed. The fact that they tried to end the game, Young Generation got too greedy. They pushed up with an Elder Dragon spawning. They could have reset, and Fnatic said, we're gonna run you down mid. We're gonna set up, and they caught Ren.
It may not be the victory screen for Young Generation, but they can take a huge amount of hope from that game as well, pushing Fnatic to 52 minutes in a game where they had a composition that seemed to fall off after the early game. They really did a number on Fnatic, forcing them all around the map, and it's a wake-up call for those EU LCS favorites in this game.
And it makes this group incredibly interesting. It could have been all of them ending the day tied 1-1, but it leaves Young Generation at 0-2, Chaos Latin Gamers with the 1-1, and Fnatic at the top with the 2-0.
But you look at the game between Chaos Latin Gamers and Young Generation earlier on, and you say, if Young Generation play like this, they should take Chaos Latin Gamers, assuming that Chaos Latin Gamers don't find something else in their tank.
Yeah, and the fact that this was a lot of Null, I love the fact that he was one of the reasons that they got back into it. Reckless died one time, it was because Null blew him up in that fight. And really, I feel as though this mid laner, he had the CS 70 up at the end of the game against Chaos Latin Gamers. In this game, he was how they were in the game, and we can see a little bit of how that mid priority is working out for them with the aggressiveness of Venus in the jungle. It just didn't translate, because the comp did fall off. Like, we're looking at, like, I just want to take a little moment for this, because they had the Draven, they had the Thresh, they had the Nidalee. They had a lot of aggressive picks in lane, but those weren't what won them the early parts of the game. It was the Syndra in mid, a very standard pick. If they had picked standard around it, it may look a little bit different when you hit those mid-game, late-game points.
Definitely. 100%. I totally agree with you. I think a lot of people will be surprised by how well Young Generation did in that game. We're going to get the thoughts on that win from Fnatic from the analyst desk. Let's send it over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Medic. Of course, a final display coming in from Fnatic to close that one out. A nail-biter of a game, and it's so close. And I just want to immediately get into this first replay. The fight for Elder Drag felt like such a huge pivotal moment for me. And when we look at it, look, all I'm saying is, yes, Caps got destroyed in the early game. But if Meteos gets credit for 2 Lee Sin kicks in that Flash Wolves game from 2016, Caps definitely gets some credit here.
Caps is by far the worst LeBlanc I have ever heard of.
But at least you've heard of it. So, we want to keep track of what he does in this fight specifically. And the first thing you'll notice is that he helps his team secure the Elder Drake, and then he's going to get this beautiful flank down onto Null. And to Null's credit, he has been playing exceptionally well, but when your flash is down, when your cleanse is down, there is very little that you can do against the LeBlanc that you just don't have vision of. And I say that he was able to get the ulti down onto Caps at the very end there, but a clutch Zhonya's prevented him from losing his.
And I think the big thing to look at is Young Generation backed kind of unnecessarily far off that Elder Dragon, and once Fnatic realized how far away they were, it was a very easy call to burn the Elder Dragon and then take the fight, whereas before it was all about positioning, and if you get the Dragon down low, you might lose the smite, but Venus ended up so far away that wasn't a threat.
And well, ultimately, I feel like Fnatic does deserve a little bit of praise for staying focused. We said, hey, Caps may be frustrated. He did kind of come back and show up when it mattered most. We also have to be a little critical for Young Generation, because ultimately, this felt like this game was in their hands. And I want to know what really went wrong here for this team.
I mean, there are a couple macro calls that you can look at, like the decision to try and end the game that clearly didn't work out that well. But there's no reason that call alone is why they lost. There were a bunch of mistakes out of Ren where if he played just a little bit better, I feel like that they probably could have been able to win this game.
I mean, what you have to bear in mind, right, is that Young Generations are the 2nd seed coming in from the Vietnamese region. And the fact that they were able to push Fnatic this far back means that they definitely deserve a lot of credit for not only their individual talent, but for how effectively they were able to punish the poor plays demonstrated by Fnatic. But also, you just saw the slight difference in experience and understanding of how to play the game, positioning, setup, that Fnatic were able to consistently punish once you got into those really late game fights.
And what I will say is it felt like if they did have a different top laner, they might have actually been able to fully punish Fnatic and win the game.
I agree.
And luckily for them, they do have another top laner on their team, Nocti, the guy that they brought in their finals to reverse sweep to get here. And I wouldn't mind seeing him potentially tomorrow because the rest of Young Generations feels like they're stepping up.
And honestly, I don't want to put it all on Ren because, of course, there were mistakes across the board. But you are right that in both of their games, he has felt like sort of a weak point. And in the same way, once again, when we look at their final series that they had to play to get here, they lost 2 games with him. And then they brought in Nocti and everything turned around. And at this point, that is exactly the kind of turnaround they need if they want to lock in a 1st or 2nd seed. Yeah,
especially given the fact that they're playing Gragas, which is something that's more in the wheelhouse of Nocti, someone who wants to play the Galio, these tankier things, and Ren was the more aggressive one, picking Gnar, J4, Renekton, these kinds of things. So it is a little surprising. I know you can't, put Nocti in once you realize you're taking the Gragas and putting it top, but it is something where it feels like this playstyle looked pretty good, and I wouldn't mind seeing it with a more tank-focused top laner.
But now we get to be even more excited for the matchup between Young Generations and Chaos Landing Gamers tomorrow for that fateful potential rematch of that 2nd seed, because Young Generations already stepping up in their 2nd game of the day. You can only imagine that they're going to continue to get better, while Chaos Landing Gamers are going to review and evaluate to see how they can make sure that they stay on top.
And on the same side, Fnatic, of course, starting off with the 2-0 does look good, but when we look at that final game, it doesn't feel quite as powerful as we look at the Cloud9, for example. And we have to wonder, what are Fnatic going to do coming in tomorrow? What are they going to evaluate? Because there's a very real possibility that in a rematch, Young Generation could take it, not just looking at Nocti or Ren, but across the board, Fnatic got pretty wrecked in the early laning phase.
I think we have to remember WE on day 1 and how well they got challenged by Lion, and they were able to win out on a very long, drawn-out game. And I think it's one of those situations where these teams from emerging regions are effectively able to challenge some of our top teams in terms of individual skill, but also in team fight capacity. And I think that for a lot of our top pool seeds, they aren't fully respecting that, but after their first losses, they should be able to learn and identify and show a lot more respect to future opposition.
And honestly, it's pretty hard not to respect them after a game like that. Well, we've got one more game before we close out the day. It's Rampage versus 1907 Fenerbahce. And as we prep for that matchup, we're going to send it over to Fish, who has an interview with the Fnatic top laner.
Thanks, guys. I'm here with Soaz, top laner for Fnatic, after their victory there over Young Generation. That was such a back-and-forth match. Did you expect going into it that it'd be such a tough battle?
Well, I didn't really quite expect this game, obviously, but obviously we don't underestimate them or any opponents that we face, even in planes or anything. So, yeah, it was a pretty close game.
Well, you guys definitely didn't underestimate them because you were able to pull it back from the deficit and eventually pick up the win. And I kind of want to talk about you coming back to Worlds. It's your 5th World Championship, and it must be good to be back here, especially after missing out last year on coming to Worlds.
Yeah, both for Reckless and me, actually, because, I mean, Reckless was in Fnatic and I didn't make it, and I was in Origin and we had pretty bad split overall. So it's pretty important for both us and the team as well to show a good performance for ourselves at Worlds. Like, for myself, I would really like to get out of groups of Worlds, and then it's extra. We also like, we're sort of a new team because we have like 2 rookies and it's like the first year of like, you know, Jesse's playing support and everything. So it's pretty new team. So I would be happy if we get out of groups, but obviously not trying to think too much about it and just going games by games.
Well, you have a slightly longer journey than usual thanks to being seeded into the plains, but so far so good. You're 2-0 on the day. Is the team confident going into day 2 after the 2-0 victories here?
I think yes, but this game like showed that. I mean, I don't know if there's like, you know, like issues. If it was like the poses issues or this kind of stuff that like set us back, and I felt like we didn't play our game. We are not talking quite as much, and since we are not talking quite as much, they got so much on mid lane. So yeah, there's definitely some like issues in terms of communication. So we need to like fix that, even if there's like pauses and long pauses and everything like this. So I guess it's just hard to remain focused, but we just need to eventually fix that.
Well, it's good to see that you guys were still able to push through despite the unfortunate circumstances. Congratulations on your 2-0 today. Best of luck going into tomorrow's matches. We're going to go into a very quick break. We'll be back with the last match today shortly.